Good morning, everybody. My name is Joellen Larrier and I will be your moderator for today. I'm very pleased to welcome Crystal Rutherford Ferguson, Chairman of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation, Mr. Deodat Maharaj, Executive Director for the Caribbean Export Development Agency, Jerusa Ali, representative from the British High Commission, based in Nassau, Bahamas. We're also welcome to have our esteemed experts, Keisha Ann Thompson, who is our international trade and law expert, who will be covering the Economic Partnership Agreement for us today. And we also welcome David Marsden and Alexis Philippidis from Category Wins, who are experts on the UK market. So I welcome everybody, all of you producers from the Bahamas for this Export to the UK, a complete guide for spirit producers in the Bahamas. I do believe that we will have a very informative morning where we will learn a lot about how to access the UK market, how to leverage the opportunities from the CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, and also looking into the specifics of how to enter the UK market with the UK spirits market as a whole. So you will get the opportunity to ask questions after each of the various presentations. So please do put those questions in the chat area and we will moderate those for the Q&A section. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker this morning, Mr. Deodat Maharaj, Executive Director for the Caribbean Export Development Agency, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you so much, Joellen, and good morning, everybody, and good morning to my dear friend, Jerusa, from the UK High Commission in Nassau, the Bahamas. I've known Jerusa for a long time, and it's so wonderful to collaborate with her and her team. And it's good for us to see Keisha and David and our colleagues from Category Wins. Good morning, everyone. And of course, I can't forget our dear friend and colleague, Mrs. Crystal Rutherford Ferguson, the chairman of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation. We are delighted here at the Caribbean Export to be partnering on this particular initiative. For us at Caribbean Export, we understand quite clearly that we need market access. But to gain market access, we must really have a premium product for a premium market and where we can get a premium price. I mean, I was in the Bahamas just like 3 weeks ago, and I know that the Bahamian rum is indeed a premium product. And I lived in the UK as well, and I know the options and the vast possibilities for Bahamian rum in the United Kingdom market. I also, at the same time, I believe that in terms of access to the UK market, whether it's Bahamian rum or Caribbean rum or Bahamian products or Caribbean products, we are just touching the tip of the iceberg. And we at Caribbean Export, I mean, we are committed to exporting, but also we understand quite clearly that it's about creating jobs and earning foreign and precious foreign exchange for our countries at some, indeed, what is a challenging time. For us at Caribbean Export, we know for sure that the UK CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement has a lot of possibilities for the Caribbean. We also recognize that it's not only about us at Caribbean Export accessing the UK market, we also understand it's a two-way street. And given the changes that are taking place in the Caribbean, I mean, there are immense opportunities for UK businesses on the investment side, on the export side, in both the area of goods and services. When we look at the climate transition that's taking place in the Caribbean and the importance of transitioning to a green economy, I mean, the UK is a global and well-recognized center of expertise, right? I mean, the UK has been a global leader in that. And so there's a massive market when we think about the CARIFORUM market, the CARICOM countries, plus the Dominican Republic, which is a market, Jerusa, of close to 29 million people. When we look at our trust into agriculture and ag tech, another immense opportunity for UK expertise and exporters. And the same when we look at the area of digitalization and technology and innovation, all very critical areas. But for the purpose of this gathering today, I mean, we at Caribbean Export clearly understand, and we have been doing this for a very long time, that to access a market, you need data. And that's why at the very beginning, we had commissioned Ms. Keisha Ann Thompson to do some analytical work on the possibilities and options and how we can take advantage of this UK CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement. We are really happy that we have category wins on board because they know the UK market. And for us at Caribbean Export, we do the analytical work, but we understand linking that to solid and concrete and practical steps to take our firms to the market, to prepare them to access the market, and when we take them to the market, to actually be able to put their products on supermarket shelves, in the restaurants, in the bars, in the case of rum, all across London. So I think for us, we are committed to this partnership. We believe the Economic Partnership Agreement with the UK, we are just touching the tip of the iceberg. There are immense possibilities for producers here in the Caribbean and for those in the UK. And I think in the case of Bahamian rum, we actually have, Ms. Rutherford Ferguson, a premium product that you can fetch a premium price in a premium market. But what we need to do, we need to get the basics right. And we at Caribbean Export, we are committed to working with you and producers in the Bahamas and with experts like the colleagues at Category Wins and people like Keisha Ann, who has done fantastic technical work to position our producers to access that market and to give our people the optimal chance of success. So we are committed to that agenda, and we are there with you, and we look forward to working with you, not today, but today, tomorrow, day on, day out, and on an organized and systematic basis. So thank you so very much, and I'm really happy that this is happening today. Thank you so much.
Thank you ever so much, dear. I think, yeah, I mean, you can't say much more than what he conveyed emphatically the importance of this this workshop today, and obviously the opportunity that we have in the UK. I'm sure most of you can hear that, detect my English accent here. So I'm looking forward to the prospect of seeing some quality spirits, drinks, rum, whichever, the next time I visit the UK and get to sample some Bahamian delicacies there. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Crystal Rutherford, Crystal Rutherford Ferguson, Chairman of the Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation, to give her remarks.
Thank you so much. Good morning and good day to all that may be tuning in from different time zones. I would like to adopt the protocol already established, but let me begin by saying I'm so delighted to bring remarks on behalf of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation for today's webinar, which is a complete guide for spirit producers in the Bahamas. It is certainly our hope that the sessions will be informative and will be useful to businesses of all sizes, from budding entrepreneur to well-established businesses looking to expand their market opportunities. With a population much, much larger than the Bahamas is, the UK is an interesting and, dare I say, very lucrative market to tap into. In fact, our information tells us that total trade in goods and services, meaning exports plus imports, between the Bahamas and the UK stood at £323 million in the 4 quarters to the end of Q1 2022. This was an increase of 38.8% or £92 million for the same period in 2021. This means, and it tells us, that there's a lot of interest in trade between our two countries, and that interest is not only growing, but it is growing in tangible ways. The Bahamas Chamber of Commerce has long believed in working with partners to establish linkages which are mutually beneficial. And for this reason, we are pleased to partner with the British High Commission, which is a relationship which is not new to us, and the Caribbean Export Development Agency, a relationship which we are very, very excited about. And we look forward to strengthening and working more closely together in the future. We are particularly interested in collaborating with stakeholders like this to expand the available opportunities to our members and to highlight the work that is currently being done that Bahamian businesses can benefit from. And we thank our partners for the work that's currently being done and extending these opportunities to us by way of, for instance, this webinar. Trade among our region, each other, and cross-border trade has always been important. As we continue to have strong recoveries in tourism from a Bahamas standpoint and in other areas, we look forward to the opportunity to explore ways to support those industries and others, while still looking for other ways to complement, grow, and diversify our economy. As I close, I trust that you will benefit greatly from today's information. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank you for your keen interest and attention in this webinar.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me yet, sir? Thank you very much, Ms. Rutherford Ferguson. Without further ado, I think it's only right that we go straight into the session today. I know that you're all waiting eagerly to learn more about exporting to the UK market. And so with that, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Keisha Ann Thompson, who is an international trade law and economics consultant, who will deliver her presentation. As I would have mentioned earlier, we will open Q&As afterwards, after the presentation. So please do put your questions into the question and answer section at the bottom of in the toolbar at the bottom of your window of Zoom, and we will field those questions after the session. So I'll now hand over to Keisha Ann.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see it, Graham.
Okay. All right. Now, I thank Mr. Maharaj for that brilliant introduction. Hopefully it keeps your interest alive because I've been given the task of delving into what is for most people a very dense topic, and I have to tell you, so don't be worried. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to break down the CARIFORUM UK EPA, not focusing on the provisions of the agreement, because of course, this is available online. All 1,000 odd pages of it will be online. So that's not what I'll be doing today. So what I'll be doing today is essentially, you see here my roadmap. What I'll be trying to do is give you a little bit of, in the context of the overall theme of this webinar, to make it really, as Mr. Maharaj said, as concrete as I can be, talking about the rules, and then Alexis and David will really bring it home, right? So first I'll look a little bit at the context in which trade takes place. Then I will have to cover just briefly the CARIFORUM EPA, looking at some of its main provisions. And of course, as Mr. Maharaj also indicated, trade data is critical, right? We have to have the intelligence in order to penetrate the relevant markets, right? And develop the appropriate strategies to get into those markets. We have to know exactly what's going on. And then I look a little bit at some of the practical aspects of exporting to the UK in a post-Brexit environment, because a lot of changes came into play after January 2021. And then I will go into I'll conclude by looking at some of the opportunities that came out of the study that Mr. Maharaj mentioned, where we looked at the CARIFORUM UK EPA and tried to identify some possible opportunities coming out of that study. Now the context. Now this may seem a little bit mundane, but really it's important. And what I want to emphasize for all of us, for all our traders, is that there are certain issues that all traders must be aware of, irrespective of whatever the trade arrangement is that you're exporting under. It's critical to understand, not necessarily the rules, but certain key concepts. As I said to you at the beginning of my presentation, I'm not going to burden you with rules, right? I'm trying to make it concrete. And so I have come up with five key concepts that I believe it's important for every trader to be aware of, irrespective of whatever arrangement you're trading under, even though today we're speaking about the CARIFORUM UK EPA. And the first of this is, we'll look at trade policy, we'll look at market access, we'll look at measures, as well as trade arrangement and market entry. So those are my 5 core issues or concepts that I believe every trader should be familiar with. Now, in terms of trade policy, we think of trade policy after having entered into a trade arrangement as something static. It would have been discussed, it would have been analyzed, and then concessions would have been made to come to the arrangement that's currently in place. However, trade policy is not static. As a matter of fact, coming out of the first joint communique from the Trade and Development Committee under the EPA, one of the issues on the agenda that was discussed, note this is post signing of the agreement, was each member's trade policy. So it is not a static thing. This is something that you have to always be aware of and educate yourself on. Now, as I said, it's important because trade policy essentially regulates the trade that's going across the borders. I'll speak about the measures later on that countries will use to regulate their trade, but it's important that exporters know what the trade policy is, because the trade policy may very be welcoming to your goods and services, as well as it may not be. And of course, members can utilize various measures to a greater or lesser degree to regulate the market, to make it more open, to make it less open. Now, in terms of market access, this is really the meat of the matter. This is what we are always concerned about. But again, with market access may be promised. Under the trade agreement, the rules may say you have access to my market. And then when you actually try to enter the market, it may actually be something quite different. And so it's always important to understand what the level of market access is that is promised. Now, how successfully a product will be traded into the other partner's market will, of course, be contingent on the level of market access, and various things influence the level of market access, which I will get to now. Now, one of the things that regulate market access is our measures. What are these measures? We know of them, speaking in trade, we know of them. There are tariffs, non-tariff barriers, regulations more so for services than for goods. But of course, as traders, you all know that regulations can also pose an impediment to your goods entering the particular market. Now, because measures, as I said, tariffs are taxes on trade. They can be different types. They can be specific. They can be ad valorem. Non-tariff barriers are things like licenses, procedures. Even procedures can be a non-tariff barrier. For example, as traders, you will know that, for example, going to the customs agency and going through cumbersome, burdensome procedures, that can also be an impediment to market access. And as I mentioned before, regulations. Now, because measures can nullify or impair the benefits promised under a relevant trade agreement, it is important for traders to understand this, because at the same time that the benefits are promised, if they are not being delivered, then this may suggest a need to trigger certain other provisions, right? For example, maybe dispute settlement, or maybe just further negotiations to see how this impasse can be addressed. Now, trade agreements, here we come to it. Now, all of these concepts that we discussed before are encapsulated in a trade agreement. Now, what is the trade agreement? The trade agreement is a set of rules that essentially regulate how we trade with each other. So under the CARIFORUM UK EPA, it regulates the way that CARIFORUM trades with the UK. So these are the rules under which Bahamian companies will operate in their dealings with the United Kingdom and vice versa. Now, trade agreements can cover trade in goods and services, which the CARIFORUM UK EPA does. They make trade more predictable because you know what treatment was promised under the agreement that was negotiated and what treatments your product entering the market should be accorded. So it makes trade more predictable. Now, most trade worldwide takes place under some form of trade arrangement. Now, sometimes, well, this actually makes the picture, the trading landscape, actually a little bit complicated. And we will see why in a little bit. However, notwithstanding, these still present opportunities. This is why countries enter into these arrangements. Now, the Bahamas, for example, is a member of the WTO. However, under the WTO arrangements, there are certain exceptions that allow a country to be a party to a trade agreement, such as the CARIFORUM UK EPA, right? This is Article 24 under the GATT. It's Article 5 under the GATT, which covers services. Now, the General Agreement on Trade and Services. In terms of trade agreements as well, you can have bilateral trade agreements. The WTO is a multilateral agreement. And you can also be a member of various other types of agreements. So as I indicated, the Bahamas, a member of the WTO. Under the exceptions, it's also a member of a customs union, right? And it can also be a member of a free trade area, right? So it's party to the CARICOM arrangement, it's party to the OECS, it is a member of the CARIFORUM UK EPA, it is a member of the CARIFORUM EU EPA, as well as various other free trade agreements such as Canada and the Dominican Republic through CARICOM. No, so that's just to give you an idea of the overlapping rules that are in place and that traders also have to be aware of and to navigate. So it sounds complicated. So this is why I tried to break it down. You can't necessarily know all the rules all the time, but at least focusing on those 5 core principles that I mentioned previously will allow you to have some idea to develop your strategies into the relevant market in an informed way. Now, we're getting into the CARIFORUM UK EPA, and I promised you that I would not bore you. And so I will just give a brief background and overview of the CARIFORUM UK EPA. I'll look a little bit at the implications for export competitiveness. Coming out of Brexit and operating in a post-Brexit environment. And then I will look at what I believe to be 2 critical issues for market access in an environment, at least in an arrangement that is duty-free and quota-free. Because if you're not contending with taxes, then what is it that could affect market access? So in my mind, these are 2 issues that are critically important, particularly so in an environment where there are no measures that we mentioned before, right? Tariffs, we shouldn't say measures, but no tariffs, right? So rules of origin and standards are the 2 main issues I believe that we should focus on. Now, just a little bit of background. We all know coming out of the referendum in 2016, it was obvious that the UK would be master of its own trade policy, essentially, in very short order. And so what had to happen was there had to be some way that the UK could continue its relationship with its various trading partners around the world. And so given the historical and economic ties with the region, it was proposed that certain continuity agreements be put in place. So the CARIFORUM UK EPA was one of these. Now, coming out of discussions on the CARIFORUM UK EPA, it was thought, based on the sentiments out there, that this was an opportunity in the sense that it was almost 12 years, right, into the CARIFORUM EU EPA, and certain benefits that were promised on that, under that agreement did not materialize for those for our traders in the region. In addition to which, it was felt that the CARIFORUM UK EPA therefore presented an opportunity to really address some of these issues going forward. And so enter the CARIFORUM UK EPA. Now, of course, the members are the UK and CARIFORUM states. What I have to say about this is that, following from my previous point, it was felt that because in this situation in the CARIFORUM UK EPA, it approximated almost to a bilateral arrangement. That is, two parties, right? The UK on the one hand and the CARIFORUM states on the other hand. But notwithstanding, it was not all 28 EU states. So it was felt that in the context of this type of arrangement, there would be more flexibility. In other words, there would be direct dialogue, as opposed to under the previous arrangement. And so that was one of the important things coming out of negotiations, that it was really felt that this agreement could do more, there could be more dialogue, because you were not contending with some 28 odd partners. Now, the structure of the agreement. Now, I'll quickly go through this because I promised you I was not going to delve into provisions, etc. The agreement is some 1,000 pages, so it's quite a bit of information for a trader to sit and read to understand what is required to enter the market. But just to say that the agreement is in 6 parts. There are 14 annexes, 3 protocols, and related annexes. And following upon my focus in this webinar today, Protocol 1 is very critical to traders, because what Protocol 1 does is that it defines the concept of originating products, right? And this is the way that the preferences that were negotiated would be accorded to your products entering the UK market. So this is very important. Protocol 2, it looks at issues of mutual and administrative assistance in customs matters, also important, but will not be my focus necessarily today. And also Protocol 3 on cultural cooperation. There are 8 joint declarations, 1 statement of trade between the UK and CARIFORUM states, and a declaration on fisheries projects, and of course signatures, very important for an agreement. So that's it for me on the agreement and its provisions. I'll get into what I believe we should really be focused on today, rather than the detailed provisions. Now, what are the implications coming out of negotiations for the CARIFORUM EU EPA? Now, we know that it covers both trade relations between the CARIFORUM states and Bahamas, and therefore Bahamas and the UK. It now dictates the duty rates that are applicable, right, as between the CARIFORUM states and the UK. On the other hand, the UK, duty-free, quota-free access, except for certain exceptions, and for the, on the CARIFORUM side, gradual liberalization. Now, the roles have been, the rates, have been rolled over from the CARIFORUM EU EPA. And this continues to the basis of trade between the regions. So therefore, what then is the big deal? Well, there is quite a big deal, because what is different now in this new dispensation is that there has been a splintering of the economic space that previously our traders would enter into. Now you have to contend with. Previously, there was one border you had to contend with. If your goods were being shipped to Europe, it was either through the UK or through some other border, maybe through some other port, maybe Rotterdam. But now what has happened is that there's a splintering. There are two borders that countries, that traders or traders from the region have to deal with. So you have to be aware of this when moving goods through the UK or directly into other UK markets and vice versa. Now, in terms of Brexit and export competitiveness, well, you might say, well, okay, fine. You know, we have to deal with the situation now, but does it really affect us? Well, yes, it does. Because what this new dispensation does in creating two borders, then obviously it's going to create two new sets of procedures that have to be complied with, definitely. And we've seen that since the rollout of certain things since January 2021, new documentation, new custom systems have to be learned. And so it may impose a cost, direct or indirect. Indirect if these measures, of course, they all with trade facilitation, implementation of new measures will impose, there will have to be some adjustment period. And so any delays as a result of this can impose indirect cost on goods going into the UK. And so this is why it's important for traders to bear this in mind, because it will affect the competitiveness of the product going into that market. For example, if the goods are exported and the wrong customs procedure is used now, because you have two markets. You have essentially the UK market for free circulation. And then if the good moves to the UK market to go to another EU country, then you're going to have to contend with their procedures. Those procedures. Now, a trader from CARIFORUM, say a Bahamas exporter who sends their goods to the UK with the intention that it goes to another EU market, will have to ensure beforehand that its goods are marketed and packaged, labeled in such a way, and all the customs procedures are in play, so that the good can move seamlessly through the UK into the other EU market. As I said, if it was that the good was intended for just transshipment through the UK, so the correct customs procedure would have to be adhered to. If not, then there will be significant delay and also additional cost involved if that is not complied with. Now, as I mentioned before, there is duty-free, quota-free access, and you can find the provisions on this in Annex 2 of the agreement. Now, all products are given duty-free and quota-free access, except for those that fall into Chapter 93 of the HS, which is essentially arms and ammunition. Now, under the UK's integrated online tariff, I found that it is a very useful tool, because you can indicate, based on the fact that you're from a particular country, you can see what the rates of duty and other charges will be on your product going into the UK market. And this is readily available online. Now, the UK utilizes the first six digits from the HS. So it won't be necessarily different from what you're used to in terms of your own customs tariff. Of course, you know, the additional 4 digits are usually a national thing, and so they may be a little bit different. But what I really wanted to focus on this morning is that what we're talking about, the subject of our discussion this morning, which is spirits, falls under Chapter 22 of the HS. And so I just had a look at the integrated tariff online for the UK. And indeed, there are zero duty rates. Of course, there's VAT that may be applicable, as well as some excise duties. So that is something that if you're interested, you can check that out, and you can know beforehand some of the costs that might be attached to that persons who buy your products would face going into the UK. Now, we get to it now. Rules of origin and accumulation. I place a lot of emphasis on this because I mentioned previously that in a duty-free and quota-free environment, then what possibly could be the impediment for your product going into the market? Well, there can be quite a number of things that can affect that. So it is, and one of those are rules of origin. Now, rules of origin are the key, as I indicated before, to gaining your preferential access. So you have to have that EUR1 movement certificates accompanying the exports so that you get the preferential access, the preferential rates going into the UK market. Now, what's important about the CAR Forum UK EPA as well is, well, one of the things from a practical exporting standpoint is that the movement certificate, the origin certificate has not changed. So it is the same EU1 form that traders would have been used to under the CAR Forum EU EPA. So that's one advantage here. Now, another advantage is the flexible accumulation provisions. Now, accumulation refers to the rules that are in place to essentially amalgamate or combine the inputs of your product so that they don't lose its origin status. You can determine whether or not the product is still of a CAR Forum origin and therefore would gain preferential access to the UK market. The CAR Forum UK EPA actually maintains both a bilateral and a diagonal accumulation provision. So say, for example, producers who use EU inputs into their products will not necessarily lose the origin status of their goods because of that exporting under the CAR Forum UK EPA. Now, another advantage is that the CAR Forum UK EPAs, and this is something that coming out of the study, this is one of the advantages that we posited under the study. And of course, it bears a lot more research. And of course, Alexis and maybe David could maybe give some insight into this. But one of the things that we found coming out of that study is that these flexible accumulation provisions could actually avoid the fragmenting of the supply chain, because as I mentioned before, the fact that you use EU inputs would not be detrimental to your exporting to the UK under the CAR Forum UK EPA, and also that it may very well provide an opportunity, right, to integrate more into regional and global value chains. And I have another idea that I will present later on in the presentation, and we see whether or not it holds water. Now, in terms of standards, our executive director spoke at the time about sustainable trade, green issues. The UK is a leader in this. And what we saw after Brexit was that there were a number of notifications to the WTO from the UK under the SPS arrangements, right, standards. And so in my mind, because I mentioned before, standards can pose an impediment to trade, right? Standards can diminish your market access. It's very critical for exporters to be aware of this. Now, notwithstanding the fact that there may be higher standards, what traders need to be aware of, therefore, that if the UK standards now diverge from what was in place under the EU and everybody followed suit, you will now have two different standard regimes to deal with. And so you may be in a situation now where in getting your goods to market, you have to ensure that those goods may be in compliance with two different standard regimes, right? So this also imposes an additional cost, but it can also be an impediment to market entry. So it is very important that traders are aware of this. Now, the statistics. Now, I promise you, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of figures and wonderful charts and graphs, but it's important to look at what the trade actually is saying to us, what the numbers are saying to us, because essentially this is why we enter into these arrangements. We enter into these arrangements because we want to export more. We want to improve jobs. We want to improve livelihoods at home. And so it's critically important to have a look at this. And of course, it's about intelligence as well, having the data to develop the appropriate strategies. Now, I believe Mrs. Rutherford Ferguson spoke to the total trade figures, and yes, there is an increase in total trade between the Bahamas and the UK. Now, when we look at the breakdown of these numbers, however, one of the things that we see is that the Bahamas is importing more from the UK than exporting to the UK. And there is a decrease, and this decrease has been a consistent decline, as I will show you from 2017. And the Bahamas is not unique in this respect, because we saw this across the region when we did the study. And so here then is an opportunity for us, drawing on the information that we gather in sessions like these and our trade intelligence to try to increase our exports to the region, to the UK. And so, as I said before, I wouldn't bore you with fancy charts and graphs, but just to have a look at the numbers. Here we see that from 2017, the balance of trade actually is a deficit, right? And this has been consistent. On average, it's also been increasing with the UK. And so this is a trend that we would hope that we can address under the current arrangement. No, necessarily having a deficit is not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, we would probably want to see numbers like both series are trending upwards. So both imports are trending upwards as well as exports are trending upwards, irrespective of the fact that the value may diverge. Now, also, one of the things that we have to look at is where is the Bahamas exporting to? Now, what we have seen from the data is that the UK is not one of the top 5 markets. Our data in 2019 that we looked at in the study showed this. But what I found very interesting in looking at the data for 2021 is that in 2019, whereas CARIFORUM or EU partners dominated the top 5, which is 3 out of 5, in 2021, what we see is that other regions are now dominating the top 5. The USA has always been there, but for the Bahamas, Namibia and Angola are now in the top 5 destination markets, and less so the Dominican Republic and Poland, EU and CARIFORUM states. Now, what does this mean? In my mind, when I looked at it analytically, I'm saying there is still an opportunity, because is it that UK has traditionally been thought of as a gateway? It doesn't mean that the UK market is not important, but is it that the UK market is now more a gateway, like in other words, to diversify trading destinations? So the UK could possibly be looked at as a gateway, not only to Europe, which is traditionally what we thought of it, because time of negotiations and the CAR Forum EU EPA, given a long-standing, as I said, cultural, historical trade ties with the UK, we thought that this would be a good segue into the EU market. But is it now that the UK is a gateway not only to Europe, but to other continents? So that's some food for thought. Now, exporting under Brexit. Now, why is it important to consider these changes? As I mentioned before, the splintering in the economic space means that there are now additional procedures, there are two borders to contend with. And so if traders are not aware of these changes, they could potentially lose their preferential access into the market just by virtue of the fact that the correct procedures have not been complied with. When we were doing our study and we interviewed some of the traders, for example, not only traders, but custom brokers in the UK, they told us that what they saw happening was traders were exporting to the UK, and what was happening was that there was a backlog because either the part documentation was not accompanying the shipments or the correct procedure codes. For those of us in trade facilitation, we know about the procedure codes. The correct procedure codes were not being utilized. And so this also can cause a delay and of course, loss of access. Now, just to summarize some of the changes, we don't have the time today to go into detail with the changes, but there have been changes in three main areas for UK customs: documentary requirements, systems requirements, and procedures. For example, now you might find your goods might have gone into the UK using only a simplified declaration. Now, in some instances, a full declaration will have to be utilized. Also, there are issues of labeling requirements for the UK versus the EU market, as well as I mentioned before, the different SPS requirements for both markets, right? So the uniqueness is that on a single journey, a trader may have to prepare their exports to deal with all of these different regimes. So what are the main issues arising from these new procedures? As I said before, two borders, essentially two sets of procedures, new systems, and these changes are actually ongoing as we speak here, because in the UK, customs is going to be changing from its legacy system to its new system under the CDS, which I believe is the CDS, the Customs Declaration system. By November of this year, they expect that the last declaration that is going to be processed under the old system will be in November of this year. And so that is also something to keep in mind. The new systems, so persons who may have dealt with your exports on the UK side of the border have to contend with these changes and have to be aware of and ready for these changes. Also, there is a possibility, because under the UK customs laws, you are free to use an agent or not. Because of the changes and the unfamiliarity with what is going on that side of the border, it may now be possible that you may have to use customs agents just because of the transition that is taking place. I mentioned before rules of origin complications, or research to date has not indicated necessarily that there are issues arising out of this. But for example, our partners in other areas, such as in Africa, have indicated that there were rules of origin complications for their exports going into the United Kingdom. So still, that is something to be very aware of. Also to be aware of is that your distributors in the UK might very well now become exporters, because no longer it is possible to just move the goods onto the EU side of the border. They will actually have to go through full customs procedures, declarations for export, exporting their goods from the UK to the EU, if that is the method of transshipment. Now, what are the opportunities? Yes, there are opportunities. Now, some of the main findings from our study in 2021 were that there's opportunities to build synergies between goods and services. And this is something that probably needs to be looked at in more detail. Also, as I mentioned before, the CARIFORUM UK EPA could be a critical enabler to developing or integrating into these global value chains. The simplification of the trading relationship is also important, because if traders experience problems entering the UK market, then there's an opportunity for these things to be discussed and possibly come to a resolution more quickly, given that now there are less parties to contend with. For example, these discussions can take place under the Trade and Development Committee. Now, also, the UK has to be looked at not only as important source of FTI and an attractive investment destination, but also this whole idea of integrating into global value chains should also be looked at. Now, in terms of more robust standards, when I was looking at this, I was thinking to myself, traders will always think that higher standards are more of an impediment than a help. However, if under the cooperation provisions, if our exporters, right, from the region can develop the tools or mechanisms to meet these higher standards, be in compliance, then their goods will be more attractive globally. And so those are some of the issues. Now, what are the opportunities in spirits? David and Alexis can tell me if this is really, I'm talking, I'm not talking sense here. No, when I looked at, because there's always this idea, and I'm trying not to be very economic now, of inter-industry trade. Now, inter-industry trade, if parties are producing similar goods, this does not mean that trade cannot take place. Now, if you look at the top 10 exports for the UK in terms of their comparative advantage, that is where they have a strength. We see alcoholic beverages right up there. Now, does that mean that there is not room in the UK market for CARIFORUM spirits? I don't believe so. And the reason why I'm saying this is that this might actually present an opportunity for integrating into these value chains, as I mentioned before. Now, of course, I have not done the research on it. This is just an idea I have, and I decide to present it to you here. But it does not suggest that there is no opportunity here. Rather, if you look at it from that perspective, there might be great opportunity here for collaboration, etc., and for increased exports of this particular product into the UK market. And of course, I guess David and Alexis will tell you about branding and all of these issues. Now, in terms of FDI, when we looked at the data, Bahamas in the region is actually one of the main destinations for UK FDI into the region. When we crunch the numbers some more, we also saw that the Bahamas, in terms of their outward FDI, was actually much greater than their inward FDI. Now, I could not get the numbers, but to me, this suggests that there may be quite a number of Bahamian firms, because of the UK's openness in terms of they have very few restrictions on foreign ownership. There could actually be a number of Bahamian companies or affiliated that are operating in the UK, right? So this is what the data is suggesting, but the concrete numbers for that, I have not been able to get at. Now, this could be leveraged as well as an opportunity for integrating into these global value chains. And so the role of FDI is still critically important. So notwithstanding the fact that Bahamas is one of the main destinations for UK FDI presently, there is still an opportunity for increased flows. Both ways, I should say. Now, in conclusion, and I hope I have not bored you, what are my main takeaways for exporters? Well, the first one is that the trading relationship, even though it's a rollover, it should not be considered as only that. Hopefully, I have sort of, you know, given you an inkling that there are new and different opportunities under this arrangement, notwithstanding the fact that it is a continuation of the arrangement that existed previously. Understanding the 5 concepts or principles that I mentioned before are critically important for traders. It is a strategic imperative. As I mentioned before, even under the TDC's, even in the TDC's first meeting, they had to discuss what each member's trade policy is. Trade policy is not a static thing. It changes over time, and it changes more quickly than the rules change. Understanding the post-Brexit trading environment is also critical for market access and competitiveness of Bahamian exports. Understanding the procedural changes is very critical. As I mentioned before, delays can occur. You can have lots of preferences just because you have not completed the relevant documentation or your customs agent has utilized the incorrect procedure code. So these things are very, very critical. We have to have an awareness of these things. There are also opportunities that are presented under the CARIFORUM UK EPA that, importantly, can allow for integration into global value chains. And this is one of the areas where in the region, we don't have a lot of data on this, even though this is one of the areas where the research suggests that significant opportunities could lie. And as I indicated before, the UK is not only an important destination market for FDI, but it could be importantly a gateway not only to Europe, but to other continents. So this is something that also should be considered. Now, thank you very much for bearing with me. I'm going through this very dense and varied presentation. I hope it was very useful to you, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you ever so much, Keisha Ann. So I don't know if there are any questions, please do put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will we'll review those, and we'll put those to our speakers in the Q&A session. We don't have any currently at the moment, so let's hand on over to the next section, which is looking specifically at understanding the UK spirits market, and we have 2 industry specialists, David Marston and Alexis Philippidis, who will carry you through the UK spirits market.
Thanks very much, Joellen. So we'll share our presentation with you shortly. Just very briefly to introduce ourselves, Category Wins is a business which is focused on helping different businesses understand the UK market, launch in the market and grow in the market. In terms of roles, just so you understand the various experience and why we're speaking to in the way that we will be. My role is very much commercial, working with sort of significant customers, let's say, on the relationship side of things and managing relationships. And Dave's role is very much about the data and the insight behind any of the sales of products which go on here in the UK. Got a lot of experience dealing with brands and products who are looking to launch, and had a really fantastic session with a set of different businesses from the Carra Forum last year. So we're really well equipped to be able to give you some hopefully really interesting insight. In terms of the agenda, we start off really broad. So we look at the total UK market, give you an idea on what's happening from a trends and a shopper perspective. Then we delve specifically into alcohol as a category at a total level. We go one level down and then have a look at the spirits category and have a real focus on rum, because we understood that quite a few rum producers here. And then finally, what we like to try and do is not just present data for data's sake. We want you to understand how you can use that data to make really useful decisions for your business and to have a practical application. As Joellen kindly just said, and there'll be a Q&A at the end of the session, so please do get your questions into the chat, and there'll be at least 10 minutes, I believe, to answer any of those questions. So we would welcome those. I'm just going to pass you on to Dave now.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much, Alexi and Joellen and Keisha Ann. Really interesting initial presentation, and hopefully we can follow that with some interesting information on the UK spirits market. So all the information you're going to see in this presentation is information from global data houses like Nielsen and Kantar. It all concerns the UK. The categories around alcohol and spirits in particular. It's the information you will see today, and we'll give you a bit more information, as Lex said, on how to use this, is all the sorts of information that buyers across the trade in the UK would expect to see, would be looking to see, will include, and we include the largest retailers over here like Tesco's and Sainsbury's and people like that, and even the smallest. This sort of information can really help you understand and sort of help them understand where the opportunities lie in the market. So really excited to work with the team at Caribbean Export, but also the team at Bahamas, because there are some really interesting opportunities over here, and hopefully this will give you a view. So to start with, I'm going to take you through what's going on in the UK market, and some of this stuff will possibly be familiar with you, but other bits may not. So we're going to talk broadly at the moment. So what's going on? Well, across the world at the moment, a global trend is food inflation. We're seeing record high prices impacted by the global sort of economics and what's going on around supply chain, but also in terms of Russia, Ukraine, and other markets as well. In the UK, food inflation is around 15% now, so that's total food and drink, and it is impacting what consumers do. It's actually quite scary in terms of the way prices have leapt up, and the view from the trade is that's going to continue for a period of time before it gets better. However, the category that we're going to focus in on today, beers, wines and spirits, BWS, is perhaps a little inflation proof, and that's a positive advantage. So the pricing that's going up in that sector is not as pronounced. What the alcohol trade does believe, though, is that we're going to see a slight drift or a slight slight fall in the consumption of alcohol as consumers manage those high prices across the trade and in terms of the supply chain. In terms of the way that the UK is structured, what we've done here is we've just split the trade out by types of stores, and 92% of volume value goes through larger stores, so that's standard supermarkets, what we call convenience stores, so that's smaller stores, but please bear in mind that the big retailers in the UK own a lion's share of that market. So the likes of Tesco have several thousand convenience stores. It also, the discounters, we have we're seeing strong growth from the likes of Aldi and Lidl at the moment, and also online. Again, the major retailers have a strong growth, a strong share of that particular market. What I would say that the lower figure there, the blue boxes, shows what's going on in terms of the trade. So we're seeing good, strong value growth across the trade. However, that's impacted by inflation. We are seeing volume down. Online had a huge spike in the pandemic because we couldn't get out there, and now we're seeing that we're seeing people more visit bricks and mortar stores effectively. I thought this was interesting. So this is Kantar's read of what's going on by different channels, and it probably gives you a wider view on how it benchmarks across the trade in terms of different types of outlet. So this is data from October last year, and it shows that grocery is flat. Actually, if you look at a value performance, we're seeing that up now. But the other areas which are doing well in this is QSR, so that's quick service restaurants. FSR stands for full service restaurants, and coffee shops, and those outlets are probably more likely to work with customers on loyalty and deals and drive customers to their outlets, and that's having a positive impact on their performance. The other point to note on this is that in terms of actual time of day and occasion, and this is really important for alcohol producers to think about this, the occasion that's taking or the time of day that actually is taking percentage points according to Kantar is evening meals and evening sort of going out and eating out in the evening, so which is prime time for alcohol consumption. This chart shows you the current market shares of the top retailers in the UK and their current performance. And what I would say, you can see Tesco is by far the biggest retailer. Then you've got the likes of Sainsbury's and Asda. Aldi, one of the discounters, is now number 4, and Lidl is is number 6 and is not far from overtaking Morrison's. The bars on the right show the actual current performance, and this is moving annual total. So this is latest 52 weeks up to February 2023. And you can see some pretty impressive performances there across the trade, particularly with the discounters, but actually all grocers are seeing, apart from Waitrose and Morrison's, are seeing a strong performance, and that is value growth. So this is where inflation is having a positive impact on the overall figures. But as we said earlier, that volumes are down, and in fact, consumers are managing spend by buying less. So number of items in basket are down around 9% year on year. In terms of where consumers are focusing, and we do see this kind of pattern in times of recession, is that we are seeing that consumers are managing, or shoppers are managing, their basket spend. So they're looking at what they buy in terms of core grocery, the week in, week out products that you have to have: milks, bread, eggs, bananas, those kind of things. And they're trying to manage that in the best way possible. They are also managing their spend out of home. So we're seeing less spend. It's not on this chart, but we are seeing less spend in terms of big ticket items, holidays, cars, white goods like fridges and freezers, that kind of thing, as well as this kind of core grocery. And what we're seeing as people are eating out less is that they're investing more for treats and discretionary products. So they are spending more on products you wouldn't expect in grocery. That could have a positive impact on certain areas in alcohol, and rum, for example, could well benefit from that trend. But yeah, that just gives you an idea in terms of the way consumers are thinking at the moment. In terms of overall shopper metrics by channel, so what you've got here is you've got number of shoppers in the top left quadrant, you've got spend per buyer on the top right, you've got volume in the bottom left, and then trips, or how often they're shopping on the bottom right. And the trends are this trend is continuing, where there are more shoppers going into store. Discounters in particular are winning. They're spending more, so spend is up, so that actual pounds or amount of their wallet is going more into grocery, again particularly in discounters. But you can see the bottom left is the real key one. You can see that volume is depressed, and online is seeing that transfer into bricks and mortar, but even discounters are seeing volumes down slightly, and that's despite the fact that customers are going into store more, essentially. But there are some positives to take out of this, and Kantar did highlighted some interesting insights recently into previous recessions in the UK, and this trend generally follows through Europe. So what's happening is that the brands that won out of the previous recessions we had between 2007 and 2008 and around 2011 to around 2013, the ones that were true innovation, not just new products or renovations to their current brand, grew they got 48% higher growth than the others, so they performed better, and that is really key. So we are seeing that, and there is growth in the recession. So in those time periods, around a third of FMCG brands across 6 countries saw growth even in times of recession, and there is. So the silver lining there is producers that have really interesting products have a real opportunity to grab some growth even in the current recession, particularly as consumers treat themselves and spend more in grocery. So just very briefly, just to summarize this section, we have seen food inflation hit the UK, and that's going to continue. However, most of the sales in the UK goes through the major supermarkets and online. And actually, there is an opportunity for innovative brands within that. In terms of out of home, so restaurants and anything eaten out of the home, if you're targeting that channel, think about how you can work and drive loyalty for those venues, how you can work with the venues to demonstrate the strength and the interesting things around your products and brands. Evening meals are winning the share of occasion. And we're also seeing strong value growth in retail because of inflation, but this masks a declining volume. So bear in mind, shoppers are looking at what's in their basket, but brands can win with that right innovation. So that's an overview of the market. I'm going to move on now into alcohol and have a look around what's going on in the alcohol sector in the UK. We'll look at the off-trade and the on-trade. So this first slide is all about the current structure of the UK off-trade. So that is the industry that goes through the supermarkets and retail outlets in the UK. In some markets, when we talk about the off-trade, there are specialist alcohol producers. So in the UK, one of the big ones is someone like Majestic Wines, and they can be classified in the on-trade in some markets, but in the UK, we call that the off-trade. And you can see the 4 key super categories at the top there: beer, spirits, cider, and wine. The performance, as you can see, is all red. So the 2 biggest being wine and spirits, 7 billion and 5 billion respectively, but are down quite significantly. Now, whilst those are negative numbers, what's behind those numbers is that they lapped massive growth in the pandemic. So we're seeing that volume come down a little bit as over time we've come out of being in lockdown, and therefore there are still really interesting opportunities. So for example, in beers, we know that craft beer is growing at about sort of 6% year on year, and that's an interesting category. And similarly, you'll see later on when we focus in on spirits that ready to drink spirits, so drink sort of pre-prepared spirits in cans, or sort of drinks with mixers in cans and things like that, are in good growth.
Dave, is it also true to say that whilst this is a decline on a year-on-year basis within the off-trade, i.e. For sort of shops, etc., it's actually still an increase versus 2019 pre-COVID?
Absolutely correct. So generally the trends we're seeing across the store is that we saw growth in the pandemic as we were at home more and we tried different products and things like that. But now, and that growth, we have maintained some of those volume growths. It's just down year on year on those significant volumes from last year. So now this is looking at the on-trade. So this is food service and HoReCa. So pubs, restaurants, hotels and catering outlets that sell alcohol. And the information on the left is just a general overview of particular size of types of spirits. So you can see that rum is a £674 million category in the on-trade. I think what's interesting is the information on the right, which is Nielsen data from January this year, shows that it absolutely backs up what Lex is saying. We're seeing that we are down in terms of, so in the on-trade, so the current figures are down 12% for total alcohol versus pre-pandemic. That's because we're not out as much. So actually in the off-trade, we're seeing that more volume in that. But that Nielsen is saying that sort of 12% lag is probably the new norm for the on-trade. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead there. In terms of split, you can see here, this is the split between the off-trade and the on-trade in the UK by alcohol type. So you can see that generally speaking, beer heavily leans to the off-trade. We buy more beer in the supermarkets, and partly impacted by the absolute space in supermarkets given over to beer because of the size of the cases behind beer. We sell more by the case than by the single bottle. The others are perhaps a bit more balanced, but wines and spirits still overtrade a little bit or lean slightly towards the off-trade. Here we're now focusing in on different alcohol types, looking at key consumer metrics and what's going on. So you've got three charts here. The one on the left is number of buyers and what's happened over the last 3 years. And this is tracked by Nielsen and CGA. You've got the center one, which is how much they spend on average. And then the bar chart on the right is the amount of times over an annual basis they go into store. And I think we've highlighted spirits there, that actually they are the highest spend per trip is spent on spirits products. And that gives you an idea of the opportunity for things like rums and other spirits like gin, premium gins in the UK. And that's been growing over the last 3 years. We are seeing a slight slip in customer numbers or buyer numbers in retail. But actually, and same with frequency. So we buy total alcohol more frequently, but we buy wine and beer probably slightly more frequently than spirits. But actually, spirits is fairly flat in terms of the number of times we go into the store. RTDs, or ready to drink pre-made cocktails and wines and things like that, it has the lowest in terms of frequency and spend, and that's because most of those products are currently sold as single units rather than cases in the UK. In terms of alcohol drinking patterns in the UK, I thought this was really interesting. So this is CGA data, again from for looking at 2022. And the information that they're tracking show that we are starting to see some slight changes in alcohol consumption moving, and this has been impacted by new working patterns post-pandemic. So more people working from home and therefore relaxed about when they drink alcohol at home and also when they're out of home. So you can see that in terms of the actual day, where we're seeing growth versus the sort of a few years ago, we're seeing growth in sort of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, whereas the classic sort of Friday, Saturday night are showing declines in actual alcohol consumption. Moving on to demographics around beers, wines and spirits, you can see what you've got here plotted on two axes is the age, which is the vertical axis, and then the affluence, which is denoted by the ABC1, C2 demographic markers on the bottom axis. We've circled three here: flavoured and spiced rums, flavoured gins and liqueurs and specialty drinks, and then RTDs. And it's interesting to see that those guys are all there's slightly higher numbers of younger consumers, and those are also slightly less affluent. You'll see later when we drill into rum that there are two distinct customer groups, and noting where your customers are should hopefully help you guide thinking around innovation and what works in the UK. In terms of pricing and promotions, so alcohol is a promoted category in the UK. In fact, on average, 37%, which is the bar chart on the left there. You've got total alcohol, then you've got the breakdown by types of alcohol. So on average, 37% of alcohol is sold on promotion in the UK. Spirits is higher. And that has had an impact, so at 47%, and is actually the only alcohol type that is actually growing the amount of promotional intensity, i.e. there's more promotions going on in spirits. And that's because of the probably impacted by the range that we have here, and also the range of premium products. So as brands struggle to, well, not struggle, but look to try and get their brands in front of customers, they're clearly, one of the ways of doing that is promoting. And actually, if you look at the information on the right there, that is actual average pricing, and you can see that across most types pricing is going up versus 2020 and 2019, apart from spirits, which has seen that promotional intensity increase, and that's had an impact on overall average pricing. So just to summarize that, so we've got wines and spirits are the biggest off-trade alcohol sectors, and most sectors are down versus last year, but are still lapping good growth versus pre-pandemic. On-trade alcohol sales are about 12% down on 2019, so that is probably the new norm. So we're probably drinking more at home, and actually that's led to innovation in the retailers. More spirits are sold in retail. Spirits also have the highest spend per trip, but we're seeing buyers slip, and also interestingly, ready to drink cocktails and other products are growing across all consumer measures. We're seeing consumers changing the days that they drink alcohol and what they do. And then RTDs and flavored products generally attract younger, less affluent consumers. And we're seeing pricing and promotion, so pricing impact on promotions growing on spirits. So now we're going to focus in specifically on the UK spirits category, and then we'll end up talking about rum in terms of the category insights at the moment. So firstly, this is the on-trade. We're looking at the off-trade. We're looking at the total off-trade in the UK here. The chart on the left gives you a total spirits figure, which is 5.14 billion, and down 9.7%. Of that, private label is relatively a small proportion of total spirits at 674 million, and that's also down, again, lapping that high growth from last year. If you look to when we look at spirits, combining it with the on-trade, the total growth of the two categories combined is actually up 7%. So we do drink a lot of spirits and a lot of types of spirits in the UK. And some of the comments earlier, demonstrate the opportunity around the category. One of the shining lights is ready to drink, especially cocktails. So when we talk about cocktails, it might be a can of rum and Coke, such as Captain Morgan, and Coke is probably one of the biggest in terms of that. It's a £500 million or nearly a £500 million category, and growing at nearly 6%. So, relatively small still in the scheme of things, but growing. And the view from the trade is that flavour and innovation are bringing in new penetration with younger consumers around that, and that will continue. And you can see there again, private label, similar sort of percentage shares of that. It's a £67 million category and growing at 21%. So there are opportunities certainly in that space. If we look at retailer shares of the spirits market in the UK, you can see the pie chart on the left gives you an idea of share of the total spirits market and their current performance by retailer. And you can see the arrows there denoting an over or an under trade versus market share. Now, this is a particular metric that the retailers will use to judge on how they are performing. So Tesco, which has 29.7% of the spirits market in the UK, is actually down year on year 1.6%. But they will the buyer in that category will consider that broadly okay because they're over trading as a category. So they will say that actually there are some silver linings to the clouds, if you like. And the three key retailers in this area that are over trading, and again being worth noting, or four if you want to include Carper, Tesco, Asda and Morrison's, with Tesco as the highest over trade versus their market share. What's also worth noting is that spirits sold online, largely through these key retailers, are around 10% of the category, or 440 million. And also, the other thing, while you're seeing growth from the likes of Lidl, Aldi and Lidl have relatively small ranges, generally across all categories in store. And this is one area, but this is perhaps one area where they're weaker, because range is really important with spirits. And some of the products that they have probably aren't as as strong as those in the likes of Tesco or Asda or Morrison's. And so whilst Lidl's in growth, Aldi's declining, which is bucking its trend, and they also are significantly under trade versus their market share. So what this chart shows, so this is Nielsen's read of share of the fixture where they buy products versus share of, that's on the left, and then on the right you've got share of off-shelf display, so where the promotions take place. And I think focusing in on spirits, they have 20.3% of the share of facings within a supermarket, if you like, versus they actually have around just under 30% of share of display items. And that's in the UK, that's down to a number of things. Firstly, beer probably has more space because of the size of pack, whereas spirits are usually individual facings. But actually it shows you that promotional intensity in spirits and some of the key brands that drive that promotional space. For example, Diageo are very strong at sort of building relationships with retailers and promoting their brands. So what we've got here, so this is looking at the off-trade now. So these are the individual spirits categories in the off-trade. So you've got not every category here. So brandy isn't covered here, but brandy's around 6% share of the category. But you've got, Nielsen have split this down by flavoured and usually straight spirits. And you can see that the bigger categories, so blended spirits would largely be whiskey, different whiskey blends, things like that, like Famous Grouse, for example. You've got straight vodka and gin, and you've also got flavoured gin. The view from Nielsen on terms of what's going on is the flavoured categories like flavoured and spiced rum, which is a £210 million category. That's not total rum, that's flavoured and spiced rum, is taking shoppers from those straight categories. And we're seeing that different types of products like liqueurs are doing well as well, and generally speaking also taking share from those straight categories. The other point which is really interesting is gin. We've probably go back a few years, gin was in huge growth, and we were seeing a lot of new entrants, particularly at the premium end, some really interesting brands, craft brands. And now it's almost a view from the trade that the category's become a bit saturated. There are so many craft gins or premium gins out there. We're talking several bays within a retail store, that actually there's too many out there claiming that space. And that's where now rum is almost, the cliche is almost rum is the new gin, and that there are opportunities around rum products in the UK. So we're going to focus in a little bit on rum now. So rum is a £1.17 billion category in the UK, and is growing by about 5%. In terms of, if we look at it as a total of the on and off trade, it captures around 13% share of the market over here. And where we're seeing, what we're seeing at the moment, the on trade is a bigger section. It's around 58% of the category, whereas the off trade's around about 42%. And what you'll see in a moment is that actually bigger brands tend to be doing better in the on trade. So that's probably impacts that leanings. So when we talk about the likes of Captain Morgan, they're quite strong in out-of-home pubs and restaurants and things like that. In terms of types of rum that are doing well, spiced, and we talked about spiced and flavoured, and those are up 9% and 4.3% respectively. They have around about a 50% share of the category. We are also seeing that premium is still doing well, And you know, premium rums in 2021 versus 2021 in 2022 were up 18%, and I think that is indicative of what's going on in the category at the moment. So that gives you an idea of the structure of how rum is performing. So this data's a little out of date, but it just gives you a view on the top 10 brands that we've got in the UK around the rum category. And this is 9 litre cases. So you can see at the top there, Captain Morgan is by far the biggest brand, but declining. What we are seeing is that the whole trend around long drinks is still favouring rum, as we talked about. We also talked about 5 out of the top 10 being spiced and flavoured rums, and those are still really interesting to UK consumers. We talked about those big brands perhaps struggling, so Captain Morgan down, Bacardi seeing the declines as well. And in fact, if you look, so this data is 2021, but I had a quick look, and Captain Morgan, in terms of some of the latest data we've got, is still declining by about 4%. So it's pulled some of that performance back, but again, it's still performing better in the on-trade. Kraken is probably one that is now turned its way around, and is really doing well in the on-trade, for example. And I think it's showing growth in the off-trade as well. But you can see the types of rum that are appealing to UK consumers from the top 10 brands there. So we said we'd give you an overview of the consumers in the UK, the rum purchaser, if you like. And what we've done is we've identified 2 key consumer groups that are buying into this category. And you can play in either of these and capture growth. So on the left, we talk about premium rum shoppers. And there's some quite interesting research done about what UK consumers see around rum in this particular consumer group. Their key drivers are around age, provenance, and education. So they want to know the story behind your distilleries in the Bahamas and the recipes behind the rums, the products you've created over time. In fact, the recent CGA research, so CGA being one of the big data companies that is part of Nielsen that looks at the on-trade, and they did some research to rum consumers across the UK, and they found that 70% of rum consumers felt that if there was an age statement on the bottle or from the marketing of the product, it was viewed as a higher quality product. The category is also attracting interest from other dark spirits categories, such as malt spirits. The other thing that's really important for this group is education. So they want to know what the products taste like, what the heritage is, what the provenance is behind the brand. They want you guys to tell them your message. And that's really where Bahamian producers can really come in and demonstrate some fantastic products. If you have a premium rum, the UK consumer wants to know why it's a fantastic product, why it's been, crafted over a period of time, what the real strength of the brand is, what the key flavor notes are on the tasting profile. That's the sort of thing the guys that buy this product love to discover. And the analogy I would use, and it's still the case is in wine. The UK consumers love to discover products in alcohol. They love to recommend. They love to get a bit of information and then tell their friends about it, whether it be over entertaining or, whether they see it in an environment, in a retail environment. And we'll touch on that a little later. But if you can play that role within the rum category, and you're a premium rum producer, that's really that's the kind of thing that you need to do. If we look to the right, where you've got a completely different set of customers. So you've got younger cocktail consumers that are consuming rum through favorite cocktails that they have had out when they're out at a nightclub or a bar or something like that. And in fact, 48% of consumers are aged between 18 and 34. And these are key shoppers for that kind of, that rum that features in cocktails. And we know that rum is popular in the top sort of 20 cocktails in the on-trade and the top 10 in the made at home. And what's really important to these guys is the flavor, the innovation, the fun. We're seeing some young brands come here A range is important. So we, again, traditionally pubs probably wouldn't sell these sorts of products, but now you're starting to see them in pubs and things like that. And actually, there's a drive to have a range of their favorite products that they can buy in a supermarket in the pubs and restaurants as well. So just looking at, just focusing in now on sort of ready to drink, the ready to drink category, on pre-planned cocktails. We talked about the size of the category. It is a largely 89% of the sales come from supermarkets, and where the growth is coming from is higher ABV products. So they're growing ahead of the category at plus 17%. That's IRI data. We're also seeing that whole thing around traditional events like barbecues and things like that. So that's really important for ready to drinks. We do see a spike in the summer season. So again, thinking about flavors around summer, that would be a good way to look at it. And also we talked about innovation. So RTD drinkers want to see interesting flavors coming through. And in fact, if you look at the chart on the left there, 1 in 4 pounds now is spent on cocktails, or ready to drink spend is spent on cocktails. And you can see some of that chart there is from Bacardi, some research they did, and you can see some of the cocktails that are popular in the UK, which you guys will know a lot more than I do about. Just a word to what's going on in the on-trade. On the left are the 3 key areas to think about if you want to target restaurants and hotels and bars and pubs in the UK. There are 3 key trends we've picked out that Nielsen and CGA have highlighted. So the first one is health, and that's possibly a bit of a strange one for alcohol, but if you think about the growth in low and no spirits, bartenders, according to a recent survey from Nielsen, bartenders expect to see that category explode over the next 5 years. So think about that low-no area, if that's something you can potentially play in. Cocktail, we talked about cocktails in retail, but also it's important in the sort of pubs and restaurants and bars, with a lot of consumers wanting a range and expecting them to drink them in their local venue because they've enjoyed that. And actually the on-trade category grew by 11 percentage points in 2022. And then finally, think about range architecture, think about the products that you have. Consumers are looking for a greater range in pubs, and bartenders can have a real influence on that. And actually, that's something where you guys can come in. So even if a bar has a number of rums or things like that, you can cite information like that to say, well, actually, we know that more consumers are looking for a better range in pubs. And we talked about earlier about how important the on-trade can be in this area, because what consumers, some recent, so this is 2023 insight from Nielsen, a Nielsen survey, if consumers try your drink in pubs and bars, so if you're thinking about that way as a route to market, a high proportion, above 70%, will likely, if they like the product, will repurchase it again, either in another out-of-home venue or even at home. So if by winning in the on-trade, if that's your strategy, you have an opportunity then to consolidate that in the grocery industry. So just final summary from me. Off-trade spirits are declining by 10%, but it is down to pandemic growth, but they are ahead of where they were pre-pandemic, and there are particular areas of strong growth such as cocktails. Asda, Morrisons and Tesco are really key for retailers, and spirits you'll need to think about a pricing and promotional strategy, because that's really important with spirits in the UK. Flavoured and spiced are generally doing better than neat products. Rum has been growing in recent times, and that's led by premium and then spiced, as we've said. Spiced rums have generally done better in the retail channel, so think about that if that's your preferred channel of choice. And there are 2 distinct customer groups to think about, either premium or younger cocktail drinkers who want innovation and higher ABV products. I'm now going to hand back to Lex, who's going to talk to you a little bit about sales, landing sales in the UK.
Thanks very much, Dave. So yeah, the purpose of this section is just to try and make some of the stuff that you've heard really kind of usable for your business. So what we've tried to do is put into 3 different areas really, and to help sort of put the context of what you've just learned there. So the first thing is, are the UK market dynamics favourable to your business? And what we mean by that, if we look at the market data at a total level, how big is total spirits, for example, if you're a rum producer? Is it growing or declining? Well, we just heard that spirits is declining. So if we're taking a supermarket example, it's declining by -9%. But if you're a rum producer, rum is growing at over 11%. So you've got an argument to take to the retailers, one, but more importantly, from a strategic perspective, it's an interesting place to be. You know, the fact that you're in a growing area versus an overall decline, it's something that people will be interested in. How big is the market for your types of products? That's a really important factor to think about, certainly when thinking about your opportunity, the number of competitors, but what value it can actually generate for you as well. We think of our shoppers and the consumer trends that are going on at the moment. So, you know, what are those trends? How are they favourable potentially to the introduction of your products? If you're a ready-to-drinks producer, for example, you're in a good space. We've heard that that's in growth. So that's fantastic. Consumers are heading towards that area. Have you got some low-calorie alcoholic products? You know, again, something that sort of aligns with consumer trends. So think about some of the stuff, some of the things that you've heard just now in those terms. And then one of the kind of critical things that you absolutely have to nail down is, what are the points of difference for my products versus what's in the market already? You have to have points of difference. You can't just be a Me Too product. Otherwise, there's no value in people buying your product unless it is just cheap. And if you're cheap, then you know there are products for cheaper products. There is a market for cheaper products, but you end up discounting. So you have to be really careful in that space. Then in terms of the category, you know, with the introduction of your product into a category, so into the rum and spirits category, for example, how will shoppers and consumers change their behaviour? Will they buy more frequently? Will they come to the category more often? And what role is your brand playing? So if you're a premium product, you're probably going to be a value adder. If you're more of a mainstream product, you might be adding volume into the category. So think about those kinds of the role that you'll be playing as well in those terms. So having looked to sort of think, is the UK market interesting for me? Are the dynamics right for me? The next question is, where could I sell my products? You know, is the selling environment a good environment for me in the UK? There's loads of different channels that you could potentially sell products in. Dave's talked a lot about on-trade versus on-trade versus off-trade. Off-trade is split out into multiple different areas. You've got grocery, you've got online specialists, you've got specialty retailers, alcohol specialists, all manner of different opportunities there. On the other side, you've got hotels, restaurants, and catering channels as well. So you need to first of all decide which channels could be of most interest to you. And then once you've done that and you think that there is an opportunity there, which are the customers within those channels that are interesting? And trying to identify those in advance of a potential launch and helping you understand, could this work for me? That's really important. When you're looking at those customers, and if you're thinking about, you know, taking a proposition to them, take Sainsbury's as an example. We learned that Sainsbury's are under trading versus their market share. So if you're going in to see the Sainsbury's buyer, you'd be saying to them, look, we understand that you're looking to try and improve your performance even more, so your market share is better aligned to the category share. And it's a positive argument and sales story to take to them. The other thing you need to think about is the corporate objectives and the customer as well. So, You know, what are they looking to do? Are they looking to promote healthier products? If you are that kind of low calorie type of product, let's say, you could be in a really good position, or a lower alcohol product, for example. Again, you know, a good position if we're talking about health. And the final one for me is I'm thinking about, okay, you know, so I understand that the market dynamics might be favourable. There could be some interesting places that I could sell my product, but can I make a profit? That's the key thing. What's the commercial opportunity? What's the size of prize? And there's a number of ways you can get to that. You can look at your total market share and see what that's worth. So, you know, again, if rum's in the off trade is worth around 200 million, or 1% share of that is around 2 million retail sales. You can see that really, really quickly. You can also put in place a bottom-up forecast to understand, you know, what that would look like, what the volumes would look like, what the margin structures would be, and what that's worth to you in value. And then when you're looking at that, and when you understand what kind of volumes are achievable, can your business actually deliver that? Are you capable of delivering those volumes? Do you have spare capacity to deliver those volumes? And then from a standards perspective, you know, it's really important to make sure that you can deliver to the standards, because, you know, as we already learned earlier on in the session, what we don't want to be blocked from entering in the market because we haven't got something which we can physically sell, because we're just underneath the standards that are expected. So just wanted to kind of give you a whistle-stop tour how you can use some of the stuff that we've learned today to try and make some decisions, and to give yourself much more of an insight as to whether it's the right place for you to be or not. So I think that's it from us. So really, I think we're into question time for both us and Ms. Keisha as well.
Great, thank you ever so much, David and Alexis. Let's have a look what we have here in the questions. We have a question from Lucan Francis. He's asking, besides heritage and provenance, is there any indication that consumers are showing an interest in brand messages relating to sustainability? I guess I know the sustainability word is being used quite heavily everywhere, and people are very conscious about where they're spending their dollars and the impact it could well have on the environment and such. What are your thoughts in that respect?
So we've heard that there is sort of an issue in terms of cost of living crisis, and, you know, it's inflation and everything else, but people still are willing to pay for great products. There's no two ways about it. The more points of difference you can deliver into your product, the better chance you can get more value for it. And sustainability is one of the key trends that we're seeing here in the UK market, that people are willing to pay more for. So if you've got really good sustainable message as part of your overall brand story, it absolutely is a point of difference potentially to take to the market. Is there anything you'd add to that?
Just retailers, I guess, look, cost of living is on everybody's mind. Prices going up, people are thinking about that. And I would say that and I've seen in several figures on this, if you had to look at sustainability numbers, it's probably moved back several points. But as Lex said, it's still really in the psyche of consumers over here. And it's certainly in the psyche of retailers and buyers, whether you're in the going to the supermarkets or going to a bar chain or something like that, or a restaurant chain. And those guys are laser focused on that. It's a commitment they've made, and it's really important. So having that sustainability message when talking to your buyers is important, and certainly a positive factor.
We were in a conference on sustainability last year, I think it was. And in the UK market, on a standard grocery product, you have a traffic light system for your nutritional outputs. So when it comes to calories and all that kind of thing on a classic food product, we had Tesco and Asda there, and both of them were talking about potentially the idea of running a similar kind of sustainability type index on products. That's not yet arrived, but they are already looking at that. So it just goes to show that it is very much top of mind, and to an extent that there is almost an expectation that you need to have a product which is sustainable and is recyclable if you're selling it into the UK market.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I think we have heard quite a lot today, and I believe that, you know, obviously there was a lot of information that was shared. It's actually quite interesting, some of the data out there, ready to drink, drink something in cocktails. I'm thinking, yes, please. As a growing market. And I think, you know, obviously, you know, the opportunity for some of our producers to be able to come up with new ways of packaging their products, presenting, you know, not just the rum as it is. I know we've got a wealth of, let's say, what do we call it, cocktail makers, and the official name,
mixologists.
Mixologists, that's the word I was looking for. And I know that you know, they're coming up with all sorts of things. So I think it'll be great to be able to see some of those creations being packaged and being sold and being distributed. Obviously, the most famous one is, you know, obviously a rum cocktail, you know, and we have seen that quite readily bottled, let's say, by a number of the major producers across the region. So it will be great to see what else is out there. I know that there was, David, you picked, I'm not sure if everybody saw it in the chat, but you picked up on something that Keisha Ann was mentioned during her presentation as it relates to, you know, what's the importance, you know, in terms of the origins of the ingredients in some of the drinks that are being produced and being sold in the UK. You know, you know, and it's, sorry, I just saw something just pop up there. and I think obviously, yeah, from a consumer's point of view, they want to see, you know, the brand, the packaging first, and then they'll get back down to this fine detail, let's say, in the hierarchy. But I think obviously once they trust the brand and they trust, you know, what they're offering, then they're going to trust that the ingredients that they put in is something that they are also very interested in. You know,
I totally agree with that, Joe. I mean, it's sort of British consumers or UK consumers, and in fact in other markets, they buy into the brand and the messaging on the brand first. So they want to see high quality products from the Bahamas, from other Caribbean islands. It doesn't matter that some of the ingredients might have come from other quarters. They believe in the brand first, and we've got brands like Levi Roots, which are UK based, but people think it's from the Caribbean. He is obviously from Caribbean. He's got Caribbean heritage, but the reality is people still think it's produced in the Caribbean, or some people do, you know, and that's the point. So it is about the brand, the message, the quality. You know, consumers will buy into that first.
If I may, Joellen, I'm picking up on what David is saying, and I think the point I was trying to make in terms of the origin of the ingredients is not so much that it would not be not so much from the consumer perspective, but from a market access perspective. And I do agree with David. And that just highlights the point that I had made before, that under the CARIFORUM UK agreement, that is actually a positive, and that is not something that will affect market access. And so it just underscores that point.
I had another observation from Keisha's really interesting presentation as well, and almost in terms of an opportunity. One of the things that we always used to suffer from when we were part of the EU, and there is a lot of benefits that we lose out on, sadly, but one of the things that we used to suffer from is something called grey imports, which some of you may be familiar with. So essentially, if you've got a wide open market, you could sell a product into Poland, let's say, which has a completely different economic structure and demographic structure, the UK market. You're selling a pan-European product with multilingual packaging into that market. As soon as you sell it in there, product is then just transported by some clever entrepreneur into the UK market, which is a higher value market, and you lose that opportunity to sell into the higher value market in the UK. So I suspect we'll actually see natural growth anyway in UK sales, because there'll be, because exactly of what Ms. Keisha Ann Thompson mentioned, there's more, because the UK market's more of a closed market now. There's more opportunity really for you guys to actually win those higher value sales directly rather than lose them to a clever entrepreneur who's based in the EU. So I thought that was quite a kind of an interesting opportunity for you all when considering your different market options and opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And also just highlighting here as it relates to, you know, how we're, you know, how we're able to partner with one another, and the UK High Commission has also pointed out they're also very keen to continue supporting the industry, supporting mixologists, supporting Bahamian companies to, you know, to enter the UK market. And so I think, you know, we're right on 3 minutes to 12, I believe. So we've done very well actually to keep to the time, to the dot. And so I'm actually going to hand over to Dr. Dami Sinanen, Manager for Competitiveness and Export Promotion, to close the session.
Thank you very much, Joellen. And I must start off by saying a very huge thank you to all the participants who have took the time out of their very busy schedules to attend the webinar this morning. I listened to the webinar right through, and I thought it was very, very informative. It certainly provided me with a lot of perspective about, you know, the market for this particular product in the UK. And I'm sure that many of the spirits producers who are here will no doubt take this information and hopefully utilize it to take them ever so closer to exporting to the spirits to the EU market. Just to note that we will have the presentations available. So anybody who needs the information, we will have the presentations available. Jolene, I think it will be available for download on our website. We will also have a recording of this webinar being posted to our YouTube page. So if you want to review the information, if you think you missed something, if you have a question that didn't come to you, but you want to ask it, please feel free to share that question with us at Caribbean Export, and we will be happy to pass it on to both Keisha Ann as well as the team at Category Wins to provide you with whatever information that you will need. It's our hope that, you know, this webinar is just one of the first steps to sort of doing a more fulsome program to support exporters of spirits to the UK. And we think that, you know, we will have further discussions with the UK High Commission and the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce to sort of see what is the next step we can do to continue to support the producers in exporting to the UK market. I just want to add that a plug really, as we are in the Bahamas, Caribbean Export is going to be hosting our Caribbean Investment Forum. It's the second annual Caribbean Investment Forum, and it's going to take place in the Bahamas in October from the 25th to the 28th. And we will have a number of foreign investors who will be coming to the Bahamas to meet with business persons in the attempt to secure foreign direct investment. So just a little plug to keep that in mind, to put it in your calendars, because we would very much enjoy having everyone here attend the Caribbean Investment Forum. I would like to thank, firstly, the presenters who are presented here, Ms. Keisha Ann Thompson, David and Alexis from Category Wins. Thank you so much for facilitating the session this morning. I thought your presentations were excellent. Thank you very much to our partners at the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Mrs. Rutherford Ferguson. I don't think she's here anymore, but thank you for really putting the word out to your members, and we look forward to partnering in the future. And of course, thanks very much to the British High Commission in Bahamas, Ms. Jerusa Ali, who is here with us today, as well as High Commissioner Thomas Hartley, who really provided excellent support and really were the driving force in having this webinar here. We thank you for your support, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So with that being said, I would like to wish everybody a great day, great weekend. Well, sorry, not weekend, it's Wednesday. My brain is already on weekend mode. So have a great rest of the week, and we look forward to working and being in touch with everyone in the future. Thanks very much. Joe, over to you.
Yes, thank you ever so much, Demi, for your vote of thanks. And once again, thanks to everybody for joining. As he would have mentioned, we will send out the link to the recording. It will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll also have the presentations available for download on the website carib-export.com. So without further ado, I wish you all the very best for the rest of the day and evening for those in Europe.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.